Hello and welcome to How to Econ. Let's take a look at demand and factors that affect demand. Before we dive in, I would like to introduce you to a few economic terms: normal goods, inferior goods, substitutes, and complements. Normal good is a product whose demand rises when income rises and vice versa. For example, eating out or new clothes are normal goods. When our income increases, we often eat out more at fancy restaurants or buy more clothes. When our income falls, we don't go out much and don't buy new clothes. Normal goods are the type of goods that we use in most economic models, unless being told otherwise. Inferior good is a product whose demand falls when income rises and vice versa. For example, cheap ramen noodles in plastic cups. Students eat them a lot because that is what they can afford. When they graduate, have jobs, and earn a lot of money, they don't eat those cheap ramen noodle cups anymore. They can afford something more healthy and delicious. Substitute is a good or service that we can use in place of another good or service. For example, you can watch my videos or you can watch other videos to understand economics. All our videos are considered substitutes. Another example is you can buy a Honda car or a GM car. They are substitutes. They might not be perfect substitutes, but they serve similar functions. And last but not least, complements. Goods or services that are often used together are called complements. For instance, computers and keyboards, airplanes and pilots, cars and car insurance. They must go together. Now, let's take a look at what is demand. Demand is the amount of some good or service consumers are willing and able to purchase at each price level. You see how I bolded the words willing and able? They emphasize that in economics, a demand for something is fundamentally based on needs or wants and the ability to pay. If you cannot pay for something, you have no effective demand in economics. At a given price, the total number of units of a good or service consumers are willing to purchase is called quantity demanded. The common notation is QD. The table here shows an example of demand for gasoline. In this case, we measure price in dollars per gallon of gasoline, and we measure the quantity demanded in millions of gallons over some time period, for example, a day, a month, or a week, and over some geographic area, for example, a state, a city, or a country like the United States. So from the first line of the table, you see that when the gasoline price is $1 per gallon, let's say American consumers are willing and able to buy 800 million gallons per day. You can say that at the price of $1 per gallon, the quantity demanded is 800 million gallons per day. When the gasoline price is $1.2 per gallon, American consumers are willing and able to buy 700 million gallons. Or we say that at the price of $1.2 per gallon, the quantity demanded is 700 million gallons. When the gasoline price goes all the way up to $2.2 per gallon, American consumers are willing and able to buy 420 million gallons, or quantity demanded is 422 million gallons. So you can see that when the price level is high, quantity demanded is low. And when the price level is low, quantity demanded is high. We can show this relationship by using the table on the left, or we can use the demand curve on the right. These are two ways to present the relationship between price and quantity demanded. The demand graph has two axes. The vertical axis shows the price levels, and the horizontal axis shows the quantity demanded. Each point on the demand curve is a combination of a given price and the quantity demanded at that price. For example, the highest point on the demand curve on this graph is associated with the highest price level on our demand table on the left. The price is $2.2 per gallon, and the quantity demanded is 420 million gallons. The lowest point on this demand curve is associated with the lowest price on our table. The price is $1 per gallon and the quantity demanded is 800 million gallons. Again, you can see that when the price level is high, quantity demanded is low. And when the price level is low, quantity demanded is high. Assume that everything else stays the same. This is what we call the law of demand. Law of demand says that if price goes up, then quantity demanded goes down. And if price goes down, then quantity demanded goes up. Remember, we have the assumption that everything else stays the same, or ceteris paribus. The demand curve is simply a graphic illustration of this relationship between price and quantity demanded. Demand curves will appear somewhat different for different products. They may appear relatively steep or flat, or they may be straight or curved, but most demand curves share the fundamental similarity that they slope down from left to right because they reflect the law of demand. Please pay attention that when the price of a product changes, it only affects quantity demanded, not demand. In economics, demand is not the same as quantity demanded. When economists talk about demand, they mean the relationship between a range of prices and the quantities demanded at those prices, as illustrated by a demand curve or a demand schedule. The demand curve can be used to identify how much consumers could buy at any given price. On the graph on the screen, you can see that we have a demand curve, and at the price P0, you will have the quantity demanded, Q0. When economists talk about quantity demanded, they mean only a certain point on the demand curve. In short, demand refers to the curve and quantity demanded refers to the specific point on the demand curve. Now that you know what demand is, let's take a look at what are the determinants of demand. In other words, what factors affect demand? In economics, we call them the demand shifters because they shift the market demand curve to the left or to the right on the graph. It's quite easy to think about those determinants of demand or demand shifters because we are all consumers with demand for something. Think of factors that affect your own demand for goods and services in your life. For example, when income increases, we can afford to buy more organic food. So even though the price of organic food stays the same, our quantity demanded increases. In figure A on the left, you see that even though the price stays the same at P0, quantity demanded increases from Q0 to Q1 because of the higher income. If at every price level, our quantity demanded is higher because of the higher income, that means our demand has increased. The demand curve shifts to the right on the demand graph as shown in figure B. It's easy to think of the opposite situation. When income increases, we buy less organic food. So even though the price of organic food stays the same, our quantity demanded decreases because we cannot afford it anymore when we have lower income. If at every given price, the quantity demanded is lower, that means our demand has decreased. On the graph, a decrease in demand is shown by a shifting the demand curve to the left. How far or how close the demand curve shifts depends on how big the shock is to our demand. For instance, if my income increases 10 times, my demand for organic food will shift further away to the right than when my income increased only 2 times. I won't get into all the mathematical details about how far it will shift exactly for now. The key takeaway in this example is for you to understand how income affects demand. There are more factors that affect demand. They are called demand shifters. Again, because they shift the demand curve to the left or to the right on the graph. These demand shifters are taste or preferences, number of buyers or population, income, price of substitutes, price of complements, and expectation about the future. They can either increase or decrease demand for a good or service. Let me give you a few examples. First example, when people prefer to wear masks in public, demand for masks increase and the demand curve for masks shifts to the right. Second example, when people make more babies, population increases, demand for baby products increase. The demand curve for baby products shifts to the right. The third example, when price of Toyota cars increase, people buy less Toyota and maybe they will buy more Honda cars because Toyota and Honda cars are substitutes for each other. So when Toyota cars become more expensive, demand for Honda cars increase. The demand curve for Honda cars shifts to the right. The fourth example, when car insurance become more expensive, demand for cars might decrease because many people might not be able to afford buying both cars and car insurance. They are complement products. In this case, when the price of car insurance increases, demand curve for cars shifts to the left to show a decrease in demand for cars. The last example is about expectation. Assume people worry that they might lose their jobs because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Demand for cars or fancy vacations might decrease because people want to save up money just in case they really lose their jobs. Demand curve for cars or travel will shift to the left in this situation. That's it for now. The key takeaway of this video is that demand curve shows the relationship between price and quantity demanded. When price increases, people buy less, therefore quantity demanded decrease. When price decreases, people buy more, therefore quantity demanded increase. Keep in mind that when price of a product changes, only quantity demanded for that product changes. The demand itself is not affected. There are 6 factors that affect demand. We call them demand shifters. One more time, the price of a product is not a demand shifter. It only changes quantity demanded. Here are 6 demand shifters. Number 1, taste or preferences. Number 2, population or number of buyers. Number 3, income. Number 4, price of substitutes. Number 5, price of complements. Finally, number 6, expectation about the future. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope it was helpful. Leave me some comments and let me know how you are doing in your econ classes. Bye for now and see you in other videos.